Chris Gabehart, the director of competition at Joe Gibbs Racing, has left. And the rumor is, I guess, that he's heading over to Spire, but I was certainly shocked.
I'm pretty shocked. I mean, I think, Chris has been a staple there.
Yeah.
And
when Dale Earnhardt Jr. speaks up about something in NASCAR, people listen. And what he just said about Joe Gibbs Racing has everyone in the sport talking. Jr. didn't hold back when he called out a major problem at one of NASCAR's biggest teams. And his words are raising serious questions about what's really going on behind closed doors. Here's what happened. Chris Gabehart just left Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, if you don't know who that is, let me explain why this is such a big deal. Gabehart was the crew chief for Denny Hamlin for 6 years. Together, they won 22 races. That's a lot. They won the Daytona 500 2 years in a row, back in 2019 and 2020. They made it to the championship 3 times. They were one of the best driver and crew chief teams in all of NASCAR.
him as the mentor, and then on the box for Ty, that's when you're putting him on that car, that shows you how important to me. I mean, they really respect him over there, and he's been very successful. And to me, it's a guy that you definitely don't want to lose.
Yeah, it's a big loss for JGR.
So last year, Joe Gibbs Racing gave Gabehart a promotion. They made him the director of competition. That's a really important job. It means he's in charge of helping all the race teams at JGR do better. It's like being the boss of all the crew chiefs. Everyone thought this was a smart move. Even Dale Jr. thought so. But here's the crazy part. Less than 1 year later, Gabehart is gone. He just left. There was no big announcement, no thank you message, no explanation, nothing. The news came out when a reporter named Jenna Fryer was standing outside a courthouse and confirmed that Gabehart had left the team. That's it. Joe Gibbs Racing said nothing about it. When Jenna Fryer tried to ask Denny Hamlin about it, he wouldn't talk. He just said he had no comment. That made things even more strange. Then Dale Earnhardt Jr. talked about it on his podcast, and he didn't sound happy. He said,
"Yeah, it's a big loss for JGR, and it kind of makes you wonder, what the general temperature is, I guess, when a guy like that's going to leave the building."
Let's break down what Dale Jr. is really saying here. When he says what the general temperature is, he's asking what the mood is like inside Joe Gibbs Racing. He's asking if there are problems we don't know about. He's basically saying that when someone as important as Chris Gabehart walks away from a job that seemed perfect for him, something must be wrong. Dale Jr. kept going. He said
that he had he had been elevated out of away from the crew chief position from Denny Hamlin into the director of competition, which is a very critical, important role. And I thought, man, this guy's perfect for this.
This is huge. Dale Jr. is one of the most respected people in NASCAR. He's a Hall of Famer. He's been around racing his whole life. When he says it's hard to imagine why someone would leave, he's telling us that this doesn't make sense. Something happened that we don't know about. Let me give you more background so you understand why this matters so much. Chris Gabehart started working at Joe Gibbs Racing way back in 2012. That's over 13 years ago. He worked his way up from being an engineer to becoming one of the best crew chiefs in the sport. He knew everything about how JGR operates. He had relationships with everyone there. He was part of the family. When he was Denny Hamlin's crew chief, they were unstoppable. They tied with Kyle Larson and Cliff Daniels for the most wins of any driver and crew chief team during those years. Hamlin never finished worse than 8th place in the final point standings when Gabehart was his crew chief. They were that good. So when JGR promoted Gabehart to director of competition, it made perfect sense. This was the guy who could help make all of their teams better, and at first, it seemed to be working. Here's another important part of the story. This year, Ty Gibbs was struggling. Ty is Joe Gibbs' grandson, and he's trying to prove himself in the Cup Series. But things weren't going well for him and his number 54 team. So, Chris Gabehart stepped in to help. Dale Jr. talked about this too. He said,
they kind of found themselves in a bit of a bind in the mid-season with the 54 and Ty, and I think he was just kind of, hey, man, I'll come in here and see if we can't get this thing heading in the right direction. This is a very critical car in our fleet, and Ty is critical to the future of the company.
And you know what? It worked. After Gabehart started helping Ty Gibbs, things got better. Ty won the NASCAR In-Season Challenge and took home $1 million. Then he finished second in the next race in Chicago. He had 2 more top 5 finishes and 4 top 10 finishes after that. The improvement was clear, but Dale Jr. wondered if this extra work might have been too much. He said,
I don't know that he chose or wanted to do that, but he did it out of responsibility, maybe.
Sure, yeah.
But I think that the idea may have been that he, his director of competition role, I would assume, would have been superseding in the long-term objective, right?
That's what
for
I
him,
thought, yeah.
Right. But
what Dale Jr. is saying is that maybe Gabehart didn't want to go back to doing crew chief work. Maybe he was supposed to focus on the bigger picture as director of competition. But when Ty Gibbs needed help, Gabehart had to step in. Maybe that wasn't what he signed up for. Now here's where things get even more interesting. There were rumors that Chris Gabehart was going to join a team called Spire Motorsports. Spire isn't one of the big teams in NASCAR, but they've been growing. People have been talking about them getting more money and possibly becoming a much bigger team. If Gabehart went there and helped build them up, that could be a serious threat to teams like Joe Gibbs Racing. But then Spire Motorsports announced their crew chiefs for next year, and Chris Gabehart's name wasn't on the list. They announced Ryan Sparks, Travis Peterson, Luke Lambert, and Matt McCall. No Gabehart. So now, nobody knows where he's going. This makes everything even more confusing. Gabehart left Joe Gibbs Racing, but we don't know where he's going next, and Joe Gibbs Racing still hasn't said anything about why he left. Let's think about what this means for Joe Gibbs Racing. This is one of the best teams in NASCAR. They've won championships. They have top drivers. They're supposed to be rock solid. But when your director of competition leaves after less than a year, that's a red flag. That tells you something isn't right. Gabehart wasn't just any employee. He was someone who built systems, who mentored young drivers, who helped make Denny Hamlin successful. He was the kind of person who could talk to engineers about technical stuff and also talk to drivers about the mental side of racing. He had all the skills you need. And for Ty Gibbs, this is a real problem. Ty is still trying to prove himself. He hasn't won a Cup Series race yet. Some people think he only has his ride because his grandfather owns the team. Gabehart was supposed to help him grow and get better. Now that safety net is gone. Dale Earnhardt Jr. also said,
being reported that Chris Gabehart's, the director of competition at Joe Gibbs Racing, has left. And the rumor is, I guess, that he's heading over to Spire. But how surprised were you to hear that? I was certainly shocked.
I was certainly shocked. And if Dale Jr. is shocked, that means this wasn't expected by anyone. Even people close to the sport didn't see this coming. What makes this whole situation worse is the silence. Joe Gibbs Racing hasn't put out a statement. They haven't thanked Gabehart for his years of service. They haven't explained anything. It's like he just disappeared. That's not normal. When someone important leaves a team, there's usually some kind of announcement or appreciation post. The fact that there's nothing makes people think something bad happened. Other people in NASCAR have been talking too. A crew chief named Tommy Baldwin made comments about family overrides, which made people think there might have been family drama or disagreements inside Joe Gibbs Racing. But nobody knows for sure because nobody is talking officially. Something is happening at Joe Gibbs Racing that we can't see, and when one of the smartest people in the sport walks away from a perfect job, that's a sign of bigger problems.